You're listening to Well, I Laughed, Part 2 of Smoke and Mirrors, pieced together. That's what, when he said he got jury duty, I was like, are you...
Lucky.
You got jury duty?
Every person knows one person that has never once been selected ever.
That's
and
me.
Takes it as a personal sign from the universe that their judgment isn't good enough or something.
Twice during college.
So my favorite thing to do is go to jury duty. Also, because jury duty starts way later than my actual workday does by at least an hour and a half.
I show up at 7:45.
Yeah.
Exactly. When did you have to show up at school in high school?
We started at 9.
Okay, well, I have a lot less sympathy for you. But it's also a lot quieter of a morning. I have one AirPod in. Gotta listen for the announcements.
Yes.
And I'm watching TikTok on top of the book I told myself I was going to read when I was there. And then you get pulled in. And I know you guys heard the story. Danny and I ended up being pulled into the same room last time. And then, like, kind of right around the noon hour, they were like, would anyone be under an undue hardship if they had to do this? And I raised my hand and I was like, I'm a public speaking teacher, and I'm the only person that can really adjudicate the students' final performances. Like, there's not like a sub we could get in to do that. And the semester ends in a week. And so they were like, juror number 22, you're free to go. They only needed 6, so I knew I wasn't really on the edge of getting pulled in. But everyone else, because Danny told me, had to stay until 5:30, and I got lunch and took a nap. I love jury duty.
Whenever I think about jury duty, I think of Stanley in The Office, where he's like talking to Toby after he comes back from the Scranton Strangler trial, and he's like asking, he's like, so how is it? Did they feed you? He's like, oh, I bet they did. And he's like sitting there, he's like, I've been trying to get on jury duty since I turned 18 to get to sit in an air-conditioned room and judge people. That's the life. And that hits.
I think I'm probably allowed to say this. I don't remember signing an NDA or anything when I was there.
Oh, yeah.
During one of the because also the trial's definitely done.
Yeah.
Once the trial's over.
One of the potential jurors, they're like, well, what do you do, ma'am? And she goes, well, I'm a philanthropist, and I like to donate money to various, like, art organizations and scholarship programs.
So you're unemployed.
But with a lot of money. But then this follow-up question was, thank you, ma'am, and have you ever been involved in a lawsuit? And she goes, well, my stepchildren did sue me for their father's inheritance.
I wonder when she got over. But when you're married without a will.
Oh my God.
So her dream job, she won it in court.
That's hilarious.
I'm afraid we're going to lose all banter before we actually start recording.
Well, we are recording. So.
But like useful things.
Cut in right there. I'm afraid we're gonna stop.
No, I think they would love an ominous voice off screen, especially kind of for what my topic is today.
The invisible hand?
Sure. I don't believe in economics though. And we can use that.
You might as well cover trickle down economics.
Trickle down in economics and other fantasies by Casey.
But there are not many fantasies going on in this brain.
He is very vanilla.
I don't know why, but in my brain, immediately the song that started playing was Your Body is a Wonderland. And I think it was like not even that. I think it was like
yeah.
Like, your body is 5'5". Just like a little bit too logical, you know? Whimsy, also not allowed in Casey's mind.
Musical is one of my favorite feelings.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you being flippant with me?
No.
This week's vocab word.
You tell me you don't have the tuition debate kids doing Membean? You have to do Membean.
What's we do the New York Day weekly quiz?
Oh, Membean is like, imagine
I am.
Duolingo for learning new words.
No, they can't use their phones.
Don't have to. Okay, sure.
It's an app, right?
It was a website.
So I went to college and got a degree in education. And that is where I learned how to teach vocab acquisition. So I use my UNO degree. No free advertising. You're just always so nice, and I think I'm nice back like 25% of the time.
I'm used to it.
He's engaged to me. I'm like really not nice.
Wait, are you guys friends?
Actually, this is the first time I've met her.
That's fun.
The only time that I
Weird
think
chemistry.
Casey can really tell that I'm being affectionate and loving towards him is when I'm mean to other people on his behalf.
Nice.
Not in person.
It's
Not
okay.
for-
I'd already planned on being mean to her anyways,
Disagree
Kelly.
with that statement, but we don't have time to take that down.
That's how I feel.
It's actually super cute because, like, what, 10, 18, 3 seconds ago, when you were talking about Casey being hurt, I saw, like, true love and compassion on your face as you were disappointed in him. And it was just like, again, I said this in other episodes. I'm just like, wow. I actually have no further comment.
Your Honor, I rest my case.
100%. Yeah, okay, but I think I am ready to go. So,
Okay, bye.
do you wanna-
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for the drink.
Oh, I need to use my phone because it's my story today.
Does that mean I'm Barbie in this story?
Casey, you also need to tell me what you want to be for Halloween.
You're AV Club Barbie.
Because you have about a week until I say fuck it and I'm not helping you.
See, this is why we need to hang out more because, of course, you got to order it in September. Of course you do.
Exactly!
Yeah. I always think about it on like October 20th.
Last week I didn't start making our costumes, or last year I didn't start making our costumes till the week before. That was a fucking mistake.
Little
I'm not
Cinderella
doing that
action over
again.
here. I'm so excited for it to be fall. We have 2 days where it peaks in the 70s next week, and I'm so excited. And because you ruined this for
Casey.
me. Also, I feel empowered to say this because by the time we publish, we will be back.
Yes.
But literally everywhere we are going on our vacation, I think the high is like 74. And I think that's like actually 7 to 8 degrees warmer than basically the rest of the days. I might bring one shirt and 7 different crew neck sweaters.
You're gonna be so hot in a crew neck sweater.
Not if it's 64.
That's fair. That does make my packing scenario a lot more difficult.
I'm sorry. You don't have to wear a crew neck sweater just because I am if it makes you feel any better.
Well, yeah, but it's a lot easier. Like, when I went to the music festival in Virginia, I brought so many options because it was all just, like, shorts and t-shirts.
Right.
I had so much room in my
Yes.
suit. I literally packed, like, 18 outfits, and I was there for 3 days.
This is me when I go hiking, but like on a long hiking trip, specifically with bandanas. I'm like, the amount of room for bandanas is literally unlimited.
Infinite.
And the last thing I want is to be in the middle of nowhere and not accessorize the way I had envisioned that morning.
Fair.
Have you ever been on a hiking trail going through your box like a raccoon, being like, I swear I bought the green one. And then like you didn't, and you have to go on the hike anyways.
that's fair.
Like, are you like?
So it's not the same.
I love being out in nature. I love being gay out in nature. And I don't mean like gay out in nature.
Yeah.
I mean like this outfit was thought of.
Yeah. I feel that.
How was Virginia, by the way? I don't think we actually got a chance to talk about it last time we hung out.
Noah Kahn. I saw him at Mission Ballroom when he came, kind of on accident. It was like right when he was getting really popular, and my friend is like an angel and always finds all these concerts for us. And so she found this concert for Noah Kahn. She was like, do you want to go to this concert? And I was like, I have no idea who that is, but sure.
Right.
Tickets were $20.
Oh my god.
$20
How long
when I
ago
bought
was
them.
this?
She bought them probably like around this time, and he performed in like February or something like that.
Okay, so you bought them like
She-
what, 6 months out?
Yeah, she bought them
5?
probably like right or shortly after they went on sale, and they were
Okay.
$20. And then when
Wow.
by the time the concert came around, resale was at like $400.
Oh, I'm sure they were. Especially
Yeah.
Mission Ballroom too.
Yeah. And so I went there, and like I had been listening to him the week before, and like it was a good concert, don't get me wrong. He's great live. The vibes were immaculate, but like I didn't really know him that well. And so now that I've had a chance to like really like bring his music into like what I listen to every day,
Right.
seeing him live is amazing. And it was his first festival that he'd headlined, I think is what he said. And the like lights came on, and he just like happy puppy dog face. He was just so stoked to be there, and everyone was like, oh.
Well, and the cool thing about folk musicians, I mean, he's kind of like new age folk, is that they always sound so good live.
Yep.
It's like that kind of music, like the raspidier, I don't know if that's the word, you are, like the hotter it sounds. I love it.
And then he was amazing, and I was like, that was an amazing concert. And then Hosier. Oh my god. that man did something to me.
The Irish are famous for that.
I found out he owns bees.
I mean, he's obviously beekeeping age.
And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And I like have somehow ended up on like Hosier TikTok because I think I like tagged him in something, and
Sure.
now Instagram's like Hosier. And I saw a video of him reading tweets about himself. And one of them was like, Hosier sings like he knows how to make love to a woman or something like that. And like stuff like that.
You know he does.
And he didn't even blush. He was like, that's good. Or something like that.
Oh, wow. Thanks.
But he was fucking amazing live. And then he brought out Noah Khan, and the entire crowd absolutely lost their shit for 5 minutes. So
Before we move too far past bees,
Okay.
I feel like Casey, I know. I feel like Casey would need me to say this.
Okay.
There is this tradition called telling the bees. And it's in like medieval ancient. It's been around forever. Where when news of the world happens, you
tell the
inform the bees,
bees?
and it like keeps them happy or pleases like the bee spirits. I don't know, but you have to tell the bees. And well, you know, in England, a lot of people keep bees, including the royal household. So the BBC had a headline that said, "The bees have been informed of the Queen's death." Second.
great.
Go ahead.
Wow, my brain cannot process that headline. But the fact that there's a tradition dating that far back that you need to inform the bees makes me feel, brings me back to the uncontacted tribes and like them being so scared of us. And like, why are they so scared of us? Probably because we're bad people. But like, why do we have to tell the bees?
The thing that makes me so happy is that you know that like that kind of stuff doesn't actually get joked about. It's funny, but it happens. So you know, someone one day was like, "Well, I'm off to tell the bees," and then I had to like tromp through a yard and be like, "Attention, bees! Her Royal Highness, the Queen of United Kingdom."
Has passed.
And then I would love to know what the bees did after that. Because we paused in America.
Yeah, we at least were like, damn. All right.
Second, I saw a tweet the weekend you were in Virginia
Okay.
that was like, "Hey everyone, I just want you to know if you like got a chance to see Noah Khan and Hosier, I don't think anything good should ever happen to you again."
I told, because this is another one that I didn't find. It was Aspen that found it, and I like, every time she does this, I like appreciate her so much, and I'm so happy when I get there,
Right.
but I always like forget until like right up until, so it was like very much last minute, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to see. And I told Abby, the one that you've met, and she looked at me and went, "You bitch."
Like not a single person in your life is happy for you.
She hit. It was like her 300th F45 class on Saturday, and she was like, "Do you want to come to F45? It's my like 300 class." And I was like, "Oh, I would love to, but I'm going to be in Virginia." And they're like, "Oh, that's great. Why?" I was like, "I'm seeing Hosier and Noah Khan." And she was like, just like, "You bitch." Those are my husbands.
I love that so much. But also, I think you're playing a really crucial role in that environment. Everyone, hopefully if you're lucky enough, knows the person who finds the concerts, but then wants to go with people.
Yeah.
And so you just are that, like, basically automatic yes. I am that way with Jacob and EDM concerts.
I would love to go to an EDM concert with Jacob.
Yes, everyone would. It's actually
I feel
a
like
really...
he would be a bop.
He is.
Yeah.
Oh, he is. He's a great time. But I can't tell you I'm almost embarrassed to admit this. The number of times I've like said yes, and then a couple weeks later, that notification pops up on our shared calendar. Because me, Jacob, and Lydia have a shared calendar.
They won't invite anyone else to it.
Yes, they're married. We're codependent.
I want to be on the calendar.
Everyone wants to be part of the calendar. Anyways, the notification will pop up that morning or like the day before that I'm like, going to Red Rocks to see an EDM concert. And so I need to get familiar with like the artists.
Yeah, so you binge listen to everything.
But I force the kids to too during our work time. So kids will walk in and they'll be like, "Mister, what is this?" Because they're so used to like lo-fi beats to study and listen to, or Bon Iver's For Emma Forever Ago album. Yeah, I know. I'm a great teacher. And they're like, what? Why are you playing Flume right now? That doesn't make any sense. I'm like, I'm going to a concert tonight.
You're like, mind your business.
By the time I get home from work, I'm like pretty versed.
That's fair.
A lot of work time those days usually.
I love that for you.
So you're feeling okay? Been a good week for you so far?
Yeah, so I had therapy today.
Right.
And I did tell Grant a little bit. There is one specific thing I did not tell him.
I wasn't specifically trying to cue this up, by the way. I'm glad you're talking about it. But if anyone's like, wow, Grant seems really jovial for trying to get Maia to talk about therapy, thrilled she's talking about it. It wasn't like we don't have a little sheet of paper where we like move the clippy down.
No, he came in and we were like talking and I was like, I might want to talk about this on the podcast. And he was like, well, if you do, I'll act like I've never heard it.
And then you didn't say anything.
No, I did tell you some of it, but I have been like stressed out about the podcast for like a number of reasons. There's some editing things that I'm having trouble with.
You're great. It's not you, it's us.
Yeah, you're great. It's the camera that is currently looking at us right now that I have some beef with.
So join our Patreon. It's at Well I Laugh
Podcast. No. He still doesn't know. Yeah, so I got on I have a telehealth therapist because I have ADHD and God forbid I have to drive somewhere to go to therapy because that wouldn't happen. But I got on and started like ranting about how I was stressed and how I like procrastinated and it's been a whole thing. And she kind of looked at me and she's like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. She was like, you're being way too hard on yourself. It doesn't need to be perfect. Your audience doesn't love you because everything's perfect. Your audience loves you and like your co-host for whatever you bring to the table. And I was like, yeah, you're right. But like, it makes me mad because if I hadn't procrastinated this, I would have had enough time to figure it out. And if I'd had enough time to figure it out, it would have been perfect. And so now I feel bad that because I need to make it perfect because I procrastinated because it's my fault. And now I have to make it perfect so that everyone understands that I like care a lot. And she was like, if I can be like a little unprofessional for a second, that is the most raised in an Asian household thing I have ever heard. I was like,
so what you're telling me is you are wrestling with your inherent worth is not tied to what you can produce. I'll let you know when I get over that myself, and we can compare notes.
That'd be really great.
We can compare notes. Someone who's 5 years ahead, maybe, on that journey. We can talk.
I feel like she read me like a fucking book. She was like, Maya's not really listening. Like, she'll listen to me, but she won't internalize it. I really need to like get on her level, which is down. Give her some tough love, low blows. I was like, the way that changed the way that I thought about it so fast.
Good.
While I was on the therapy appointment with her, I like texted one of our like podcast friends to ask for help. And she was like, see, you have people that can help you. Now go on and get some snacks, and then you'll reward yourself with the snacks every time you do something that you don't want to do.
Dear listener, I am not the podcast friend she texted.
No.
It was a technical issue, and which one she knows I wouldn't know, and two, she knows I would defer to you anyways. I think it's been a while since I've said this, so to those new to the podcast, welcome. We were saying this when there was 40 of you. Maia, especially early on when we were setting everything up, would text me a question, and I would respond with, hey, if you want a thought partner on this, absolutely. Let's wrestle with it for a second. If you have already figured out the correct answer and are now just kind of in a polite, kind way trying to solicit my opinion, I fully trust you. Do it. And almost always the answer was, it's done.
Good, because I already did it.
Also, the trying to come at you at your level thing. The first week of school, I was looking at my varsity debate students, and I was like, yeah, and I got to step out to this meeting real quick, but I think there's going to be several new kind of underclassmen who are going to come, and when they come in, just kind of riz them up for a second.
Yeah.
And my seniors went, what? And I go riz them up. And they're like, mister, what do you think riz 'em up means? And I'm like, talk 'em up, kind of hype 'em up, get 'em excited about this. And they went, that is not what that term means. Active flirt with the intention of making plans. I essentially was like, hey, so when I'm gone, you should pre-Netflix and chill with these underclassmen who are coming. And that's why I don't ever try to get on their level anymore.
See, here's the thing, is that I would have picked that up for context clues, and that's why I'm so not street smart at all. Because people will say things and be like, I think I know what they meant.
Yeah, welcome to Teach You to
Yeah,
Schooler.
did not know what they meant.
And so then, like, after a week had passed, I then started to intentionally use it incorrectly, right? I was like, okay, so I was like about to run this lesson, so like me and Miss Sam were like really rizzing each other up. And they'd be like, boo, stop, mister. I'm like, now you understand sarcasm. Everything's a lesson. Bow, bow, bow.
And now I have the upper hand again. Like,
Anyways, it's been 53 and a half quarter minutes. Go ahead and head to your next class. I love my job, I really do, but it's so easy to make fun of.
The 53 and a half quarter minutes. Yeah.
Well, good. So it sounds like you're in a pretty good place. Yeah?
Yeah, the therapy was okay. Usually when I have therapy, or at least recently,
Sure.
when I've had therapy, Casey will come home and he was like, how's therapy? He's like
the
feeling
dogs are
the
still
waters and he's
outside.
like, how's therapy? And half the time I'll be like, it was fine. And he's like, okay. But
Is the lights off or off? Let's go.
can I bring you some chocolate? Yeah. But today was fine. Today she really was like, if you need to, just tell your listeners that your therapist told you that you can't try and make this perfect. Like, as long as you don't say my name, say whatever you want about me. It's like, I might.
The video, which is what we lost, is really like the big loser in that equation is YouTube, which one
Well, and the Reels.
still has, sure, but we got plenty of stuff. We're magic.
I'm still mad about it.
But it's like, YouTube is the last platform where we have yet to get a single mean thing
That's
said
true.
to us. We have the most supportive YouTube community.
Well,
Have you been deleting some stuff?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm going to choose to live in my fantasy. Surprising no one.
We haven't. I don't think we've said what happened with the camera. The camera cut out after about 15 minutes, and it was an hour-long episode. And so now we're just lost 45 minutes of video, and so now we can't make reels of that with our faces at least.
The third episode we've kind of lost in this 17 episode arc.
I know. I almost got into that with my therapist, and I was like, let's not actually.
We know you know so much more now than you did in February.
So true though. Oh man.
How long have we been recording for so far?
Oh, I don't know. I just was recentering it because it was weird since I had something else open before. It's been half hour.
Nice, fun. Well, good. It sounds like today was a pretty good day.
Yeah, it was fine.
Nice.
It was boring.
Work week for me is kind of packed. The Monday off was nice. It was just Labor Day. I know this is coming out in mid to late September, but it was just Labor Day. But I don't know if this is true for your workplace. When you have a 4-day work week, you still have 5 days of work you got to produce.
Oh, no.
And it's like, I didn't have any classes that I had to teach, which was nice, but I also then didn't have the 2 plan periods where I get a lot of paperwork and family communication and grading stuff done. So it's every day. And today's Wednesday. Super excited about this. This is the highlight of the week. I'm also a member or a part of a couple different kind of leadership positions within the activity. And we had a virtual meeting yesterday, and a different organization has a virtual meeting tomorrow. So it's just kind of long, full days intermixed with naps on the couch where I stop breathing.
Just practicing death.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's good. Everything. There's nothing new really to report, which is nice.
So we just moved into a new office space for my work, and it's in the same building, just up to one of the top floors, and it's
Right.
a bigger space and it's brand new, so
Okay.
it's fancy. We all have standing desks and dual monitors and all of that cool stuff. We actually have our own little break room now instead of having to go to one of the office-wide communal ones.
Sure.
And it's first day of school vibes, big time.
That's so cute.
Because everyone's
What outfit did you wear? Everyone's dying to know.
not this one.
She looks amazing. She just casually has corduroy pants on right
These
now.
are one of 2 pairs of office pants that I have right now. And I usually at max will go into the office twice a week, but now I have worn both of them. And I have to go in again tomorrow.
Tomorrow's the third day.
Will anyone notice if I wear
No,
the first one
they
again?
won't.
No, they won't. I work with a bunch of men. So
Correct.
yeah, first day of school vibes. It's interesting because now we have the bigger office space. We got a new office space because we outgrew the other one, so it
Okay.
was too small. But still, there's a lot of people that are working from home, so it's half the people are there and set up, and half the people, their stuff is still in boxes from the old place, so it's weird.
Right.
But I spent like 2 hours. I'm like still really light on work. I'm like in between projects. So I was like, what can I do in the office? And so I like unpacked a bunch of plates.
You know,
it was so fun.
I have actually given this advice to many, particularly my debate girls when they're seniors. I say, hey, I several of you are about to become interns here soon. Like first week, make the worst pot of coffee of your life.
Yeah.
And then you will never be asked to do it again. And that's so crucial that you don't become... Because the assumption will be, even if it's not said, that you do some of those like secretarial household tasks. And so I hope you made a really weak pot of coffee today at work.
We got a Keurig, so
nice. Okay.
No coffee was made. I did reorganize the entire kitchen because I don't know why they put the things where they put them, but it made me mad.
No, I know. That's what I'm laughing at. Is that you would walk into this kitchen and be like, well, I can't work like this. So
I've done that in my own kitchen.
Imagine at one point someone walks in and all of the mugs are shoved onto the table as you move like a colander for some reason into like a different cabinet.
What I really did is I just took a long lunch because I did have an hour for lunch, and then I spent like a second hour helping like get stuff situated, and like I have a light workload, so I don't think anybody really cared. But every time I was in the kitchen, I would also, some of our cabinets were really up high, and so I was like standing on chairs lowering the shelves so that we could reach everything. And there's like these men that would walk in periodically to get like a new coffee, and they were like, is she okay? Is she okay? Like, what's happening right now? Why do I have to talk to you while I'm heating up my lunch? I would rather die.
Legit have to go 5 days a week every week now?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank God for that.
I'm pretty sure they know if they made us do that, we would all quit. Yeah. So I think they're saying 3 to 4. I'm gonna probably do 2 to 3.
Well, you have 2 work pants, so
2 work pants.
I did you a pants stipend, or 2 is fine. Isn't that how corporate America works?
Yeah. I don't know what could possibly be wrong with that. Yeah. So we'll see.
Nice. Well, I'm super excited to share tonight's story. It was one, I told her this when I walked in, or when I, like, in the middle of the day, I was like, oh yeah, I got this guy wrapped up. I just have to finish one last article, and that's just to make sure there's not, like, one little good gem left.
Yeah.
Article was longer than I thought it was, and was not almost done to wrapping it up. So I've been, like, living in the story for the last 2-3 hours, and I'm really excited. Smoke and Mirrors, when you first pitched it to me, I was like, oh, yes, like kind of misdirection, intrigue. And when I think of Smoke and Mirrors, I'm like, what I think and what I see is not what actually appears in front of me, okay?
Yeah.
So as a little primer to the actual story, I'm going to ask you this question. Do you know what novel the September 11th terrorist attacks inspired?
What novel they inspired? Oh, man. I feel like I should, but I don't.
This is a bit of kind of like a Reddit conspiracy. It like
I
the
feel
links
like it has
are there,
nothing to
but
do
it's
with,
weak. No, it has nothing to do with
I feel like
attacks.
it's like, I don't know, like life in New York City or something like that.
Kind of close, actually, for a specific group of people, strung together on a Reddit theory. So this is me saying right now,
Reddit.
People come for me. This is not a GT
Did you
original.
know that's
Brandon Lee Mulligan? Yes, I did. I tried to quote him. That is my trauma.
I love
that
Brandon
is my
Lee
trauma.
Mulligan.
Same.
It's the best thing.
That's why I quoted him. Anyways, so the September 11th attacks happen.
Yes.
It's a tragedy. For those of us who were alive at the time, it's like shattering. I'm in 3rd grade, so I'm like, what? This is weird. For older adults, it like really rocked them. Watching the attacks in New York is a man who in that moment then has an existential crisis and decides that he is not happy with what he's been doing with his life. He decides that he's going to follow his passion, which is music, and founds the band My Chemical Romance. My Chemical Romance then produces a bunch of songs, which then get listened to by a certain author of Twilight, who identifies the music of My Chemical Romance with the Jacob character in Twilight. And of course, we all know what novel Twilight produced after it lived as fan fiction on the internet. 50 Shades of Grey. is fanfic that reimagines those characters' energies, not as vampire werewolf
That
teens,
makes so much
but
sense.
in New York City. So in absolute historical dominoes, these links are kind of weak, but 9/11 wrote 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, no.
20 years later,
Oh, no.
50 Shades of Grey. So you know how you kind of like feel right now? I have, in my opinion, an even better historical version of that story. It's going to get triggered by a volcano in Indonesia.
I legitimately have no idea where this story is going.
So, Maia, to now start the notes, how does a volcanic eruption create some of our most well-known genres today that even actually have a weird tie-in to Twilight? Well, I'm really excited to tell you that story.
Because I have no idea.
I'm going to hit you with a name, and maybe you know it, maybe you don't. It's okay. It'll probably come to you later if you don't know it.
Okay.
If I were to say the phrase, Mary Shelley was born in 1797.
Frankenstein.
Oh, okay. Cool. Buckle up. We're about to learn the truth behind the woman and the book, Frankenstein. There's more information on my phone for this episode than in any other episode I have done before. And I've talked about legal conservatorships and the science of birth control.
I'm so excited.
So then the real question is, how does a volcanic explosion create Frankenstein's monster? Is kind of like where we're getting to, but then there's like so much more.
Yeah.
Mary Shelley was born in 1797. Her mother died only 11 days after her birth. Despite this, her father ensured she was educated and grew up in a blended household, which was fairly unusual at the time. But the really interesting about Mary Shelley's life, her family, and the people she would interact with is that basically their entire lives were unconventional, unusual, framed by their radical politics and philosophies, and would be, I would say, probably curious and intriguing even in 2023, but like in the best way possible. So Mary Shelley, who was she? What was going on? Well, many people report that as a child, she was a free spirit, highly educated, and at the age of 16, eloped in Italy.
Dream.
To the poet Percy Bysshe, Byssshe, Percy Bysshe Shelley, which is where she gets his last name, who praised, quote, the irresistible wildness and sublimity of her feelings. Fun reminder, she was 16, and children are not interesting in that way. I know, I'm a professional.
How old was he?
In his early 20s, and married to someone else. All of that to come. Already, though, I have to pause for a little story. I've had the privilege of teaching at the school that I teach at right now for many years, and that's been a privilege. Long enough for there to be several classes that have graduated, specifically from the speech and debate program. A couple years ago, some of the graduates, a year or two after college, invited me to dinner, and it was so sweet. We're getting actually pho at a restaurant in the neighborhood, and we're chatting, and they all kind of look at each other at one point. There's probably 3 or 4 of them. And they go, Mister, can we tell you the most important lesson you taught us in high school? And I'm having this like Tuesday with Maury kind of like, yes, children. How did I shape your lives, right?
See, that's how we're different, is that my immediate reaction would be like, oh, shit.
Well, see, that's what my reaction should have been. They go, we got off to college and we realized you were right. No one's interesting until they're 23. See, in an attempt to get them to leave my room one night when they were heartbroken, looked at them and I said, oh my God, get over yourself. You shouldn't date in high school anyways. No one's interesting until they're 23. I want to point out that that's never my first reaction to a child having a bad time. But I think part of me was like, oh my God, you knew him for a week.
Get out!
He can't pass biology. Like, oh my God, you are brilliant. You're so smart. And your life is going to be so much bigger than like this little thing right here. And I have dinner plans. And so like, I just can't mourn for you in the way you want me to. No one's interested until they're 23. Get out. And they were like, you were right about that.
That's super fair.
Mary Shelley was married at 16.
Didn't she also write Frankenstein when she was like hella young?
We're getting there. I'm so excited about this episode. Okay, so just a reminder, children aren't interesting in that way. But also, Mary Shelley had a really interesting childhood. Again, more to come. Sorry, y'all, not to tease it out. It's just really hard to layer a story like this that has so many kind of like angles to it.
Yeah.
So Mary and Percy each encouraged each other's writings, and they married in 1816. Shortly after Percy's wife died, death by suicide, which of course was a tragedy because Mary was kind of friends with her. Yeah, kind of. I think post the whole like thing, like it was also though still a scandal in a lot of ways.
Wait, so did they get married before she died?
So it was kind of more like they eloped while Percy was married.
Ooh.
Also, I'm not sure if the article I read used eloped in like the verb sense or in like the noun sense. Like they went off to Italy and lived together, or like sealed a ceremony, or both. And then a little bit of tragedy, which we will talk about more later. Over the course of their marriage, Mary and Percy will have 5 children, only one of whom will live to adulthood.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So perhaps the thing that is most known for is the book that she wrote, which we all know today as Frankenstein, specifically Dr. Frankenstein's monster.
Yes.
If you're going to survive this episode, you need to know that the man who created the monster, his name's Dr. Frankenstein. Yeah. So when you're talking about Dr. Frankenstein, you're talking about the doctor scientist. When you're talking about the monster, which is what they call him in the book, his name is Monster, or the monster. Or in the playbill, the first time this was staged in the 1820s in London, it was just a blank line, a nameless monster. Mary Shelley thought it most appropriate.
That's hilarious.
So let's talk about how the volcano is involved in all of this.
I have a lot of questions.
So in 1816, a mountain called Mount Tamora, I want to make sure I say this right. Yes, Mount Tambora, Tabmora, Mount Tambora in Tabmora in Indonesia erupts, and it's such a huge eruption and throws so much soot and other debris that it literally blocks out the sun. And the year 1816 gets referred to as the year without summer because global temperatures drop. In Europe, famine actually like happens because like the harvest fails. But Mary Shelley and Percy were like kind of aristocratic. I mean, they weren't like loaded, but they weren't.
So they weren't like facing the
serfs.
issues.
No, they went on a vacation to Lake Geneva.
Wow.
In Switzerland. And it was there that the important things are going to transpire. So they are invited. Let me find this exactly. I'm sorry, 1 second.
You're good.
So it's 1816. Mary and Percy make their way down to Lake Geneva in Switzerland because they've been invited by their friend Lord Byron, which is probably a name that you recognize, and we're going to get into him later. And it is in Lake Geneva that Lord Byron proposes to Mary Shelley and several other people that they have a ghost writing competition. Not ghost writing in like our modern sense where you secretly write the book and get someone else's name on it. They are all to write their own ghost story. Because again, everything's kind of gloomy. They're like on vacation in Lake Geneva, but everything's kind of gloomy. And so Mary Shelley sits down in 1816, in the middle of summer, but a gloomy summer, writes the book Frankenstein as part of Lord Byron's writing competition.
Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. Why can't I recognize his name?
He was a philanderer, a cheat, a playboy, a really interesting dude, probably pansexual, had a club foot, like a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah. The amount of really interesting people I had to be like, nope. Gotta get back to Mary Shelley in this whole story. That happened many times.
Okay.
So she writes Frankenstein. That's not the shocker. She is inspired by the work of Luigi Galvani. And that research is really recent and is happening in Italy and helps inspire her work. What did Luigi Galvani do? Yeah, he was the guy that electrocuted frog legs to get them to move.
I hate that.
But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
So that was at the time a huge breakthrough. But Luigi was wrong. Luigi thought that this proved, quote, that every animal had an electric spirit. Essentially, he thought he was literally electrifying your soul as proof it exists.
Imagine him on a dating app.
Come back to my place and
I'll go.
I got a defibrillator, which is actually
I wanna push you around.
Well, I will. Well, I will. No, but his work did directly lead to the invention of the defibrillator.
Okay, but it's like, I'm gonna electrify you tonight, baby. Like, what?
So Luigi Galvani was like, when I take electricity, muscles move.
No shit.
Souls exist, right. So he did that first, and his nephew goes, interesting. Okay. Kind of different take, but I'm gonna wait for you to die. And then I'm gonna kind of do my own things kind of later. So
wait, so his son is the one that invented the defibrillator?
Nephew. And no, they don't invent the defibrillator, but their research and like what you can do when you electrify muscles and cells. They were like kind of the first people in Western medicine to like do something like that. The nephew carried it out, and the nephew was like, I don't know if we're electrifying souls, but maybe we are. And I think the way to figure out if we're doing that or not is to electrify people suffering from insanity. And we're going to see if it works. And do you know what the absolute crazy thing is?
Everything you just said. What?
Today, electroshock therapy is a recognized treatment for people who suffer from severe major depression. I'm going to let you sit with that for a second, because then the next sentence I have is even crazier.
I thought you were going to say homosexuality.
No,
that's where I thought you were going.
That's been disproven. Thank you, Utah.
So it goes from you to me then.
Exactly.
And I don't think I like it.
So electroshock therapy is a today fairly common treatment for people who suffer from major medical depression with about a 50% success rate.
Major medical depression or major depressive disorder?
Probably the second one, because that sounds like a phrase, and the thing I said
because that's what
was
I
hinting
have.
to it. I think it's like debilitating. Literally cannot move or speak.
Getting institutionalized for depression.
Yeah. But you don't actually have to be that intense.
I have to get ketamine now electrocuted?
It is also used as a treatment option for simply severely depressed pregnant mothers, as it is the least harmful for the developing fetus.
What the fuck?
Oh, this is also a great time to name my sources. Today's episode is brought to you by Wikipedia, as well as the article Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley, Extraordinary Mothers and Daughters. The article from the McCarter Organization, Mary Shelley's Haunted Life, and then an absolutely beautiful and thought-provoking, and I'm not even mad if you pause to go read it. I mean, you'll spoil like 80% of the podcast. Afterwards, the article, The Strange and Twisted Life of Frankenstein from The New Yorker. None of this is me made up. You can still see some of the hyperlinks from Wikipedia in this article. Yeah, so you can electrocute pregnant mothers, and it apparently is least harmful to the child.
I just feel like in that scene in Barbie when Will Ferrell's character comes out and the pregnant woman is there and he's like, oh shit, I thought we discontinued her.
Midge. Exactly, Midge. So let's just do a quick little recap, because I know we've hit you with a lot of kind of crazy details early on. So the year is, I think at this point, 1818, getting close to, it's 1818. So back to Mary. She is 19 years old at this point. She has written a book. She has already lived a really big life.
Has the book been published?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's just been published.
Okay.
But before any of that, when she was a child...
Wait, hold on.
Yes.
I'm confused. So she wrote the book in the same, at the same time that she met Luigi.
Never met Luigi, just inspired by his work that's
Oh,
happening
so she
at the
knew
time.
about him before she wrote Frankenstein.
Correct, and that's what inspired the book.
Okay,
and then she wrote it as part of that writing competition, I think in 1816, 17, but then built it out from like a short story to a whole novel, and then at this point it's published by 1818.
Okay.
So at this point she's like 19 years old. Mm-hmm. She has given birth twice, lost her first daughter, who was alive for less than 2 weeks, but has a son named William. But before she was a mother, she was married at 16. But before she was married at 16, her stepmother grew kind of jealous of her because she, as she got older, looked more and more like her dead mother. And so stepmom sent her away to Scotland. And dad was like, hey,
sorry,
Scotland's great. And like, I love you, you know?
And your mom ate your snacks. Would you mind bringing some back?
Sharing is caring. Forgot all about that.
I just edited that episode.
Yeah. No, that was good. Yeah, so she gets sent off to Scotland as a young child because the mother she never knew. I mean, technically met, but her mom died when she was 11 days old. So the woman that she never met, who she keeps hearing stories about, and that apparently she is looking increasingly like, is the reason why she then gets sent to Scotland away from her only other living parent. And then when she returns, falls in love with essentially the very first person she meets, which is Percy, runs off to Italy, gets married, writes this book, becomes friends with Lord Byron.
Oh man, that name is so familiar.
Yes. By this point, by the time the book is published, she has been married for 3 years.
Damn.
Percy is, I think, by the way, at this point, still married to a different woman back in England, and her marriage and partnership with Percy is strongly disavowed from her father, who's a famous philosopher at the time.
Okay.
Now here comes the next kind of really interesting thing about all of them. Mary's 19, 20. Mary and Percy believed in a concept called free love, which in the Romantic era was specifically anti-marriage. So I think a lot of articles say they were married to like kind of help explain what that dynamic was, but they were specifically not married, which is why they could live together while Percy was still married to a different woman back in England.
Was she a proponent of free love? The other woman?
No, I don't think so. None of the articles are like, and all three of them live together. None of them say that.
Cute. So he was like, I need a new piece of ass. What will let me do that?
Well, followers of free love believe that anyone should be allowed to love anyone, even outside legal and societal constraints, like marriage and a disapproving of infidelity. Although idealistically on board, this puts some strains on their relationship.
What?
For instance, it is wildly suspected that Mary's stepsister, who she was pretty close to, Claremont, not joking.
What is the name?
Claire.
What are these names?
It's pretty well speculated that Mary's half-sister, Claremont,
if you will,
Cece and Percy had a sexual relationship together, which produced a child. Still, she at this point had given birth 3 times in her life. Her first daughter, which didn't live more than 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Then to her son William, who survived, and then to a daughter that would not survive past the first couple of days. And after the death of her second daughter, her first son William would then also die. Also happening around this time is she loses her half sister, not Claire, but a different one.
Yeah.
And then Percy's still married wife dies as well, and she is like relatively close to a lot of them, so there's both infant death and adult death kind of surrounding her at what is essentially should be the peak of her career. Frankenstein's this huge runaway success, and she is surrounded by tragedy.
The way that I would need so much electroshock therapy.
Yes.
If I were her. I don't want to say I'm so depressed. I am depressed, but I don't want to have my own child. I think I've said this several times.
Yeah.
I have no interest in going through pregnancy. If that's your journey, I applaud you for that. I can't. I don't think I would enjoy it. I don't know. I can see myself wanting a kid, but I would prefer to adopt.
Right.
Also because I don't need another kind of depression on top of the depression I already have, being postpartum depression.
Right.
And then what if that kid dies?
Yeah.
No, I would have not lived past the age of 14 in the 1800s.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, one, a lot of people didn't. And two, let's go ahead and just kind of bookmark the intense amount of trauma that Mary Shelley experienced. Like, both right when she's stepping into her own adulthood, if you even want to call it that. I mean, some of these things are happening to her when she's 16, 17, 18 years old. I mean, I have 16-year-olds in my sophomore class right now at school, right? Who at that point would have been sent off to Scotland, came back, then moved to Italy, eloped, lived with a man who was married to someone else, had 2-3 kids, and lost, I think, all 3 of them. So to add to this crazy mix, Mary Shelley's life was always surrounded by really eccentric characters. Her mother and father we're going to get into here in just a second, but her mother and father were both super famous and intellectuals, considered like thought leaders in certain fields, things like that. Lord Byron, who was like a famous poet and things like that at the time, the philanderer. Poet. Her husband, Percy, famous poet. And then at that writing competition at Lake Geneva, she became friends with a Dr. John Polidori. Want to take one guess what Dr. John Polidori wrote? Oh, he was the first person to ever write the book The Vampire.
He's the creator of Dracula.
Correct.
That's been on my list for so
I'm sorry. I mean, this is essentially the one sentence he gets mentioned in this story, but it's like
carry their way, but
this Lake Geneva retreat sees the writing of The Vampire, which is like kind of like a classic. Still,
when you mentioned the retreat, I was like, oh man, that was where Dracula came out.
Oh, I love it. That's the part that you know, because I've always found Frankenstein to be way more interesting.
Because I was watching a documentary. I think I like to put on something in the background when I'm doing like reading or editing or whatever, and it was like old abandoned mansions or something in Europe, and they covered the mansion of the guy that wrote Dracula, and so I think I remember something about that Lake Geneva retreat, and so I was like, bing, bing, bing.
Yes. So what's so interesting is that The Vampire still fits kind of into like the classic Gothic style of writing, which was popular. And then Mary Shelley's The Frankenstein kind of pioneered science fiction, which was an evolution of Gothic. But I think man's influence and power being such an overt theme made it science fiction in its own. Yeah. And so yet another connection to Twilight. 100%.
My eye just twitched for those of you who aren't on YouTube.
And so all of this is happening around her as all of this tragedy is happening too. And then kind of right after Frankenstein gets published and those 2 adult people who are close to her pass away, here's what happens. She would lose 2 more children during this time.
That's crazy that all of this loss happened before she wrote Frankenstein, or like after she wrote Frankenstein. I guess she had some loss before, but like I would have thought that the idea of Frankenstein would have come from all of that loss, but instead it's coming like
so part of it came before, part of it came after, and Maia. Oh, your AP English teacher would be so proud of you, because page 5 has a lot to say about what you just hit on. We're all at the end of page 1, top of page 2.
The way that I live to try and impress my AP English, AP Lit, and whatever teachers, man. One of them hated me. One of them, I think, tolerated me.
This is how you know that she did a good job. Because even still to this day, you're like, if I don't make Mrs. Walker proud, or whatever her name was.
Her name was Miss LaPlante. Me and Lee talked about her. LaPlante. And then she got divorced, and now she's Miss Chase.
Well, good job to her. Sounds like she did some work.
Shout out.
And so I know this has been kind of all over the place. Shout out to past me who managed to pull everything together. So by the age of 25, Mary Shelley has suffered a horrific miscarriage that she only survives by being placed on ice at the last second. She has given birth 5 other times. 4 of those children have died. She has lost her mother, who died before she ever had a chance to talk to her, and then at least 2 other important adult women in her life. And then, at the age of 25, the last tragedy will occur. Percy will set sail on the ocean and never return. and she will lose her lover at the age of 25.
I'm assuming he died and didn't just like
Correct.
peace out.
Yeah.
Okay.
People are actually not entirely sure he didn't intentionally sail into a storm because he
sounds like he
suffered from
might.
his own depression.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it wasn't like she was left like the first wife was.
I wonder because I don't know, maybe this is my own mental health talking, but I wonder if because she's experienced so much loss, I wonder if she doesn't really process it like you and I would process loss because has experienced just like intense amounts of it. She's just like, this is what life is. You know, like if you have a weird experience with your parents and like you tell it to your friends and they're like, that was not normal.
No
like,
one has experienced that but you.
Yeah, I wonder if that's kind of what she was going through, that she doesn't really understand that life isn't normally like that.
Well, I think we talked about this in like 5 to 10 episodes ago where we were talking about, you know, when you've experienced something that shapes you like this kind of trauma would. And I think we said something along the lines like, there's so much great work out there that you can do and so many great books that you can read. But at the end of the day, there's like this hard truth that you have to come to, which is that once something like that has happened to you, it's happened to you.
Yeah.
And that's now like a permanent state of condition for you. And like learning to live with it. And so, yeah, she suffers some insane tragedies in the first half of her life where like no 2 years looked the same really. And it is during that time she writes the book that she will become most famous for. Now, I do have this like little bit of good news, this little bit of sparkle and everything. So, obviously, so this is 1822. She's 25 years old. Her husband or lover dies at sea.
Yeah.
And she'll be in a majorly depressive episode for the next 5 years. Naturally.
Yeah, that tracks.
Starting in 1827, she'll begin to write again. And from 1827 to 1840, she will write prolifically and have another 13 years of writing. Her one child who survived, Percy Florence, named after the husband she loved and the city he was born in.
Oh.
I read it because the article presented it as 2 sentences, and it was like, Percy Florence, named after her beloved life partner. And
Period.
I was like, oh.
And the city he was born in.
I was like, well, thank God his name's not Percy Dallas or something like that.
Casey Atlanta. Florence is a pretty name.
It is.
Florence Pugh. Love you. I just kissed the
And remember,
screen.
it's a middle name, too. It's Percy Shelley Jr., Percy Florence Shelley.
Yes.
Junior.
Yes. Would he technically be a junior, though, since his senior died?
Yeah. I think, yeah.
Really?
Because then if he were to have a kid named Percy Florence, it'd be Percy Florence III, even though he never met the senior.
I thought it resets.
Nope. It is if the person right above you had that name, you're the junior or you're the next in line.
Oh, so if it's like skipped a generation or
little
something.
bit, yeah.
Okay, because I seem to remember that there's that rule because I was always shocked because the royal family is George
like
the Third, and I was like, there's at least been 15 of you.
Right. I'm not an expert on when it comes to that kind of stuff.
That would make sense.
But I can tell you guys, I don't know if I've ever shared this on this podcast. So my name's Grant. That's not a surprise to anyone. My dad was the second born son in his family. And that meant he just got kind of whatever name he wanted.
Yeah.
If my dad had been the firstborn son, I was my dad's firstborn son. Love my little brother. What I'm trying to say is my name was almost George Thomas the Fourth. I know. You can't have a funny little podcast with a name like that, let me tell you that.
My ex-boyfriend, the one that I was like officially in a relationship right before Casey, I'm not going to disclose his whole name. He was several years older than the rest of us because he took a couple gap years to move to Colorado and establish his residency here so that he could get in-state tuition at Mines. He introduced himself to people as a bit, as first name, middle initial, last name, the third.
That's so funny.
And no one ever, like, questioned him on it until, and I think, like...
That's so funny.
Maybe it was the end of freshman year, because I knew him when I was a freshman. I didn't start dating him until I was sophomore or something. And I was like, are you the third? Because I, like, saw his dad's name or something, and he was like, oh, no.
I think it's just really funny.
Yeah. I was like...
Literally, actually, maybe exactly conversely, this summer
Literally, actually, maybe
exactly the conversely. This summer, I almost went by Ran, which are the three letters in the middle of my first name.
Yeah.
It was only going to be at parties or parties where I didn't know the host or anything. I think it'd be so funny to be like Ran, like Ein. Not my politics, obviously, but that's a funny joke.
That is pretty funny. My mom's full first name is Harumi, and that's Japanese. It means beautiful day, but it's really hard for people to pronounce for some reason. Just like with any...
Say it one more time.
Harumi.
Harumi, okay.
Seeing it
It's really similar to halloumi pasta, which is interesting.
Yeah, but if you see it spelled, I don't know why people really struggle. They struggle with my name too because I think it's because it's 3 vowels in a row. They can't figure it out. I'm not sure what the deal is, but anyway, she gave up after a certain point, and she goes by Rumi as a nickname. Okay. And then for a while, whenever we would go to Starbucks and they would ask for your name, she would just give my name for a while, which doesn't really work because they can't figure out my name either. But anyway, she went to a dressing room, I think, at some point where they asked her what her name was, and she said Rumi, as she does, and they misheard her and put Ruby. And so that's how she just became Ruby.
Goes by Ruby now?
Not really, but if she's in a place... At
stores?
Yeah, at stores or at Starbucks or something, she'll just be like Ruby.
Griffin and I, when we are at Starbucks, just go by Thomas. There's something about the GR that makes a really hard sound for people to hear when you're across the counter.
No, that's super fair.
So I've gone they're name for the order, and I'll be like Grant, and they'll be like Brant, and I'm like, when have you met a Brant? Or I get a lot of Brents, which isn't my name at all, And so that's I'm like, I don't want to take this coffee, it's not mine. And then Griffin's name is Griffin, which I think has a lot of the same stuff. A hard start of the sound and then gets real soft at the end. Yeah. And so Griffin and I both go by Thomas. And so when we were in Omaha for his wedding, I think we were both at Starbucks and I ordered first.
It's Thomas.
And they were name for the order Thomas. And my brother goes, God damn it.
Have you seen the new John Mulaney skit?
Yes, I've now seen the new stand-up special.
Where he's talking about how he got stopped by officers when he was a kid, and all 3 of their names was John.
Yes.
And they're patting him down.
Your name better not be John.
He's like, they call me Baby J on these streets. I think my name is a little different because I feel like people have heard it and recognize it. But then I watch every time as I say my name, and they're like, oh, okay. And then they go to type it, and they're like,
oh, no.
And it's so funny because I know it's either going to be Maya, which is fine. I get it.
Like Maya Rudolph.
Yeah, or it's going to be Mia.
Sure.
Which is
wrong.
which is my name. Or something else. Did I ever tell you that? So I went to a religious elementary school, and one of my pastors...
Yeah, you've told me that. Oh, sorry, was that not the story?
No, I went to a religious elementary school, and one of my pastors wrote me a birthday card and literally addressed me as Mafia.
Oh, no. Oh, I have bad handwriting. Even I wouldn't pull off something like that.
I wonder if it was bad handwriting and they meant to write Maria, and it just looked like an F.
When at a Catholic school, that's probably a safe bet.
Yeah, either way, I was offended. Anyway.
I also want to point out, sorry, one last thing. Griffin and I are under no assumption that our names are hard to pronounce.
Yeah, it's just hard to hear.
Like other names are, like your mom's name. Yeah. It's hard to hear, and then they write it down wrong, and then that game of telephone happens where you're like, I don't actually think that's my coffee, even though that is my order.
Yeah, but then, I used to work at Starbucks, and this is the trick that I learned working as a barista at Starbucks, and it now makes me irritated whenever I go there and they don't do it, is that if I was working in the register, I would only ask for a name if they didn't pull their phone out to pay, because if they pull their phone out to pay, it autofills it.
Nice.
So you don't have to worry about it.
You don't have to have that moment.
Yeah, and so I will do anything to avoid embarrassment.
Do you know whose name's actually really easy to pronounce?
Tyler?
Mary Shelley. Good. Boom, boom, boom.
Continuing.
It's also Jesus. Depends on who you're talking to. Mary Shelley, who in the 1840s apparently kind of like stops writing after a writing career. In the 1840s, her one living child, Percy Florence, and this is what the article said, marries a woman who Mary Shelley adored. Okay. And she spent the last years of her life surrounded by loved ones as she aged.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
In 1851. Oh. And this was, I think, sweet at the time. A little creepy now, but I think very sweet at the time. In 1851, Mary died of a brain tumor, which makes you hope that it kind of happened fast or was painless.
Yeah.
After she died, her family cleared out the contents of her writing desk. In it, they found locks of her children's hair, all 5 of them, as well as a parcel of Percy's cremated heart, which was wrapped in his last poem, titled Adonis. Okay, I was going to say J. Edgar Hoover. What is his name now? I can't think of it. Edgar Poe.
I don't know.
Not the founder of the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover. No, Edgar Allan Poe.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
How did she get a lock of her child's hair if it was a miscarriage?
I don't think that's one, but the 4 others, I think, were born with some kind of hair or something. And I guess they recovered Percy's body after the drowning to be able to cremate part of him.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah.
That's dark.
And she just kept them all there, the creator of science fiction, as she, wrote away. And we are going to reference at least one more pieces of her work.
Okay.
This is, and I'm so sorry, listener, the halfway point.
Also, I'm really sorry for my Edgar Allan Poe reference.
No, that was so funny.
I felt it in my bones and I couldn't let it go.
I actually think we're past most of the tragedy. So if you're like, oh, it's kind of raining where I am on this Wednesday, it's kind of sad. I think the saddest part's done.
Yeah.
I would say from this point on, everything's just super interesting.
Yeah.
And it's about kind of the legacy of Mary Shelley. So to start off understanding the legacy of Mary Shelley, it is important to understand the people who surrounded her and the people that she was often compared to. Her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, was a radical and free thinker. She offered one of the books. Did you get it? Did we
I
do
have
pause?
just a bunch of syrup on the bottom, so I'm
Good
trying
for
to
you.
stir it
Oh.
a little bit. Yeah.
A little jazz hand action. Anyways, she
love
was
sugar.
Mary Wollstonecraft
Yes.
was considered a radical and a free thinker. She authored one of the books that formed the foundation of the women's rights movement.
Oh, what?
The book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, was written in 1792 in the heat of the French Revolution. It upholds the importance of education for all women and attacks the sexual double standards prevalent at the time, articulating concepts that still resonate today.
Sorry, who wrote this?
Mary Wollstonecraft, her mother, who she never formally met.
But this was published in 1817.
1792.
Sorry. I thought
Oh,
you
you
said
thought it came from the grave?
Yeah, I was like, wait.
Hot tub time machine match? No.
No,
1792.
yeah. Okay.
That book, along with Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley's mother, along with other works, has made her famous even today, and she is viewed as a founder of Western feminist thinking. Her father, William, not Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley's father, the other person in that biological batter.
Yeah.
Her father, William Goodwin, was an English journalist, political philosopher, and novelist. He's considered to be one of the first exponents of utilitarianism and the first modern proponent of anarchism. She is related...
Who is this woman?
Exactly. So her parents are the founders of anarchism and then separately feminism.
Sorry, where was she born again?
In England. These are political radical philosophers at the time. And then her friend, Lord Byron, who invited her down to Lake Geneva. So Lord Byron was a, quote, famous philanderer and one of the and was the one that hosted the writing contest.
Yes.
Lord Byron fathered many children, both in and out of wedlock.
Right.
One of his very few legitimate children was called Ada Byron, who then got married and was called Ada Lovelace. And here's what Ada Lovelace did for the world, who was roughly the same age as Mary throughout this entire time. What did she do? Well, Ada Lovelace, Lord Byron's daughter, was one of the founders of the field of computer science and worked on computation machines in the 1820s.
What?
In the 1820s, she wrote an article that AI was not possible, that artificial intelligence was not possible. And then here's the quote. Ada's mother, so disgusted with Ada's biological father, so Ada's mother, who regretted that man so much, feared that her daughter, Ada, might grow up to become a poet as mad and bad as her father, Lord Byron. And so she raised her instead to be a mathematician. Ada Lovelace, a scientist and who was as imaginative as Victor Frankenstein, the fictional character, was. She would, in 1843, provide an influential theoretical description of a general-purpose computer, a century before one was built by Alan Turing.
Sometimes I just look around, and I don't know if I've come out to you. I'm bisexual. Sometimes I just look around and I'm like, wow, women.
I do too.
You know, with like those little sparkle emojis next to it, like
100%.
women.
Because it's both what Ada was able to do and
That's
the fact that her mother was like, you will
insane.
not be like your father.
And she was
He
like,
will
bet.
found computer science. And so here's now where I need to confess something that I didn't tell you when I first walked in.
no.
So yesterday you were like, hey, are we like still good to record on Thursday? And I was like, I'm not good to record on Thursday.
Did
I
you
have to
lie to
record
me?
on Wednesday. No, I knew I was going to be ready. Had I picked a topic yet? No. No. And then that night I laid in bed, had a lot of anxiety, and then was reading about all these really interesting people, and I came across Lord Byron, and Lord Byron had all of this really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But I was struggling to actually tie him closer into today. And
Right.
so then I saw his daughter, Ada, and I was like, well,
Then
maybe
you
that's an
saw
angle. But
Frankenstein.
like, no, there's not more. And then I saw that Lord Byron was connected to Frankenstein, and then also saw that like there were vampires involved. And then when I recognized Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, I was like, oh, I wonder if she's related at all to Mary Wollstonecraft.
New
And
York
she was-
City.
This is how we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
That's a reference to What We Do in the Shadows. If you need a little bit of serotonin after all of the horror Grant has just laid on us, give it a watch.
So basically it was like, wait, hold on. Lord Byron was connected to all these really interesting people. Oh, Mary Shelley is one of those people. Oh, Mary Shelley's life is actually way more interesting. And her book, Frankenstein,
Yeah.
far more modern. And actually,
Very modern.
as I like read more and more about it, at this point now, this morning,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wait. This is actually not only a story I would be excited to talk about, but there's actually stuff in the story that I didn't know and that I think people
That's so cool.
might be really interested in. So,
Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna Google Lord Byron really quick because it's gonna drive me absolutely. Like you've said a lot of things that like I've connected with Lord Byron in my head, but it's gonna drive me nuts.
famous for taking essentially 14-year-old stable boys as lovers, but also
Cute.
married women, loved sleeping with a woman and then sleeping with that woman's immediate relatives, and died in Greece helping fund their war against the Ottoman Empire.
What? It's the satiric realism of Don Juan. What? It's gonna drive me nuts. Like I don't know why I
Lord Byron
recognize
was
his
like the
name.
world's biggest hater. He thought everyone was awful but him. And he published a play or something that then got a really bad review in the Edinburgh newspaper. And so then he wrote a whole play called English Plays and Scottish Critics. That was basically like, and people in Scotland don't know art if it smacked them in their face.
Fucking, it's Outlander. That's really dumb. It's absolutely Outlander.
It's your call if you want to keep these last 5 minutes or not.
It's
for
gonna
that
get capped.
reveal.
It's gonna get capped.
Okay, so let's go back to the book Frankenstein, which is the last part of this episode. And I promise you, this is not a book report. That there's actually some like shocking kind of frame, understanding, shaking things that I want to point out to y'all. So first, and I'm sure many of you, along like Maia, have kind of cued in on all of this. Quote, many people believe that Frankenstein is a deep reflection of the pain and trauma Mary Shelley had experienced as a child. Famous for a mother she never truly knew, and a father who remarried and then essentially abandoned her. Tied to the illustrious poets that had become family friends, and the man she loved, she had lost 4 children and loved ones already by the time Frankenstein was fully published. In part, she might have felt like Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
More likely, she felt like his monster, sewn together from the parts of the many other people who had shaped her life and reputation. Her name was Mary Wollstonecraft Goodwin Shelley. Each name a connection to a different famous person.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So she's 25, has accomplished the biggest thing in her life, doesn't kind of get to be her own woman, has loved and been hurt tremendously
Oh my God.
and has the rest of her life still ahead of her.
I have goosebumps.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
And then this comes from that beautiful New Yorker article.
Yeah.
I started to lift heavily there at the end because there were times where I was like, well, I just can't write that
Yeah,
better than
no,
they
I feel
did.
that.
Frankenstein is 4 stories in one. It's an allegory, a fable, an epistolary novel, and an autobiography. A chaos of literary fertility that left its very young author at pains to explain her, quote, hideous progeny. In the introduction she wrote for a revised edition in 1831, she took up the humiliating question: how I, then a young girl, came to think of and to dilate upon so very hideous an idea, and made up a story in which she virtually erased herself as an author, insisting that the story had come to her in a dream, and that writing it consisted of, quote, making only a transcript of said dream. A century later, when a lurching, grunting Boris Karloff played the creature in Universal Pictures' 1931 production of Frankenstein, directed by James Whale, the monster, prodigiously eloquent, learned, and persuasive in the novel, was no longer merely nameless, but all but speechless. As if what Mary Wollstonecraft Goodwin Shelley had to say was too radical to be heard, an agony untreatable.
Oh my God.
I know that, like, in her own lifetime, when people would write about her, they called her Goodwin's daughter.
Oh.
Or Shelley's wife. And when she first publishes Frankenstein, the author is kept anonymous. And it is Percy, her husband, writes an introduction and signs his name. And then people are essentially left to guess for the first couple years as to who wrote Frankenstein. Because she gets erased. I don't know if it's because she wanted, or if it's what was expected, or if that's just kind of...
Either way, like, it doesn't matter if it was her opinion or her, like, decision or not, because that's still so powerful that she wasn't listed or, like, credited with that story.
It is hard now to think of a way to be connected to more famous people and still try to have your own name in the field. I mean, you think of the kids of, like, famous pop stars or actors, but oftentimes they have, like, a dad who was, like, just a director, or a mom who, like, just wrote a column. But, like, both of her parents are considered foundational thinkers of, like, different schools of thought. And then her husband was, like, perhaps one of the most celebrated poets at the time, and then spent a life surrounded by other people who were famous. And so in that world, how can she step into it on her own? And then to then take her pivotal work and to strip it of Mary Shelley and essentially insert... Oh my God, we're about to get into it. Okay, so getting her memory wrong and getting the book wrong is the last section of my notes. The attempts of Mary Shelley's son and daughter-in-law to, quote, Victorianize her memory, because it's during the Victorian era, to Victorianize her memory by censoring biographical documents contributed to a perception of Mary Shelley as a more conventional, less reformist figure that her works would suggest. Her own timid admissions, because her husband dies so early, one of the big things she does after Frankenstein's is she spends years pulling together his poems and putting them in an anthology and publishing it for him. And it essentially was like, oh, I just, like, had all the poems. But she's, like, an active curator and editor of it, and it's a wild success. And it keeps his memory alive longer. It's absolutely Alexander Hamilton's wife.
Oh my God, that's exactly the
For
thought
the 3,000 people listening to this and screaming.
I was like, that's like Alexander's wife.
Yes.
What's the song she sings, like, they'll remember your name or something like that? Man.
And so then...
He didn't deserve her.
Not only were people misunderstanding and, like, watering down her legacy at the time, but we are doing it to this day still. The book has largely been stripped of its original meaning, at least in our understanding of it. Thinking that Frankenstein is a cautionary tale about man's power to create and destroy, like many in the tech world view it, is a shallow reading of what Frankenstein is. Frankenstein is no Mary Shelley's Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
She wasn't concerned about a man's ability to create and destroy. As one author put it, this is a way to make use of the novel, but it involves stripping out nearly all of the sex and birth. It strips out everything female from the story of Frankenstein.
Oh my god.
Because to truly understand Wollstonecraft, her mom, to truly understand her, you need to understand how radical she was, how crucial that radical thinking was to her world development, and how that motivates the character of Frankenstein. This monster who will commit murders, but in her version, you are to feel for at the end.
Yeah.
The monster is the villain, but also the person you're cheering for. Her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, a woman she knew only through what she wrote, was many things. Her mom said this once before she was born. Mary Shelley's mom said this: "I conceive it is the duty of every rational creature to attend to its offspring." Her mom wrote in Thoughts on Education of Daughters in 1787, 10 years before even giving birth to the author of Frankenstein. Shit. As Charlotte Gordon notes in her dual biography, Romantic Outlaws, which was kind of the name of this school of writing, Mary's mother first met her fellow political radical William Goodwin in 1791 at a dinner party hosted by the publisher Thomas Paine, who wrote Rights of Man and I think also Common Sense.
The original T-Paine.
Yeah, a little bit. Apparently, Mary and Goodwin, her father, like her mom and dad, when they first met, were, quote, mutually displeased with each other. It's an enemies to lovers arc.
That's my favorite kind of trope.
An enemies to lover trope produced the author of Frankenstein, a real life version of it too. And where did it happen? Thomas Paine's dining room, as they talked about their various stuff. I know. So when I said I thought I was done, and then I got to like the second half of an article, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to go on that run. Oh, this is what I'm talking about. I haven't even gotten to the part that I'm most excited to talk to you about. And so if you are, like 2 hours and 15 minutes in, still with us, there's a nugget coming your way. Okay, but first, the enemies to lovers bit. Goodwin would later write to a friend that it was obvious that him and Mary's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, were the smartest people in the room, and that he couldn't help arguing all evening. Mary Wollstonecraft, the mothers, it doesn't help that they have essentially the same name. Wrote Vindication of the Rights of Women, and that appeared in 1792. The next year, Goodwin published Political Justice in 1793.
Oh my God.
Mary Wollstonecraft then had an affair with an American diplomat, which produced a child out of wedlock. Shortly after the child was born, the American diplomat skipped town. Cue it up, USA. No,
USA.
But it was that daughter that would die when Mary was like 20.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, like the half sibling.
Yeah. Her name was Fanny. And then shortly after, Mary and Goodwin would start hooking up and produce a child, and they got married not because they believed in the institution of marriage.
They're like, oh,
they
shit.
didn't, but kind of like so that way the daughter wouldn't be born out of wedlock.
Oh.
Goodwin's daughter would bore the name of his dead wife as if she could be brought back to life, another afterbirth. Why? Because Mary Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, died 11 days after birth when a physician reached up her, I think, vaginal canal into her uterus and with his bare, grimy fingers removed after birth.
That's when she died?
And what's so critical to understand, too, is that Mary Wollstonecraft's whole political view was that it is deeply unethical to exert control over another person's bodies. We're not even talking about abortion at the time, because it's 1790s. She's like, kings over serfs, landlords over peasants, men over women. It is unethical to assert that kind of control over another person's body. And that is how she dies. That is how her mother passes away. And then how does her father deal with that? Because it's super common not to name the child right away during this time.
Yeah.
Names her directly after her now deceased mother.
Oh my God.
And so it is through all of these complex, and this is the part that I wrote. So
You did the Target lady hands.
I did.
In case you were
I did.
wondering.
I got a little excited again. So to understand Frankenstein, the book, it is complex and compelling, both revolutionary and counter-revolutionary. In one breath, the book seems to denounce violent revolution as only being able to eat its own young, much like what's happening in France at the time. In the other, it denounces the free use of another person's body, like kings over peasants or men over women, much like her mother had argued.
Oh my God.
Mary Wollstonecraft Goodwin Shelley took pains that readers would understand the sympathies that lied not only with Dr. Frankenstein, who will see several of his own close friends die, and whose suffering is dreadful, but also with the creature Dr. Frankenstein would create, whose suffering is worse. The art of the book lies in the way Shelley nudges readers' sympathies, page by page, line by line even sometimes, from Dr. Frankenstein to his
monster.
creature, even when it comes to the creature's vicious murders. First of Dr. Frankenstein's little brother, then of his best friend, and then of his bride. Much evidence suggests that she succeeded in winning people over. Quote, "The justice is indisputably on the creature's side," wrote one critic in 1824. And his sufferings are, to me, touching to the last degree. You end up feeling for the monster in Mary Shelley's book, who, at one point, looks at Dr. Frankenstein and begs, "Make me happy," a clear stand-in for "Love Me."
Oh my God.
So when you think about that as the monster that you're supposed to understand, how do we go from that to like the slurred, slow, dumb speech?
Yeah.
Racism.
Oh my God.
Among many moral and political ambiguities of Shelley's novel is the question of whether Victor Frankenstein is to be blamed for creating the monster, usurping the power of God and of women, or for failing to love, care for, and educate it. The Frankenstein is Oppenheimer model considers only the former, which makes for a weak reading of the novel. Much of Frankenstein participates in the debate over the abolition of slavery, as several critics, both then and now, acutely observe. See, the revolution Mary Shelley was most interested was not the revolution happening in France, right next door, but the one that was happening in one of France's colonies, Haiti, when the world's only slave revolt was rising up. Because Mary Shelley and her husband, Percy, or lover, Percy Shelley, were both adamant slavery abolitionists who refused to ever drink sugar because of the way it was produced. They lived by the motto.
Oh my God.
So Mary Shelley intentionally incorporates this like read on like, you have created this monster, you failed to care for this monster, and then it is out of a lack of love that this thing has become from creature to monster, and now you're afraid of it, which is an exact parallel explanation for what's happening in the 1830s when people are like, sure, slavery's bad, but how can you free slaves? How could a person ever forgive someone for the state that they had been in? Frankenstein, if you read Mary Shelley's abolitionist political feelings into it, and if you understand her father's anarchist ideologies and her mother's own feminist thinking, understands that what Frankenstein is actually about is that failing to care for enslaved Africans is what created them into this force that you were afraid of to begin with, and thus the responsibility lies with Dr. Frankenstein, not the creature. Both Shelleys closely followed the debate on abolition, both in the years before and after the writing of the book Frankenstein. Together, they read several books about Africa and the West Indies. Percy Shelley was among those abolitionists who urged a gradual emancipation, fearing that the enslaved, so long and so violently oppressed and denied an education, would, if unconditionally freed, seek vengeance. He asked, can he who the day before was a trampled slave suddenly become liberal-minded, forbearing, and independent? A question absolutely explored in Frankenstein.
Oh my God.
Frankenstein has always been about race. Specifically, it was about black people.
Yeah.
In the first stage production, which Mary Shelley oversees in London in the 1820s, early 1830s, the actor who plays the creature wears blue paint as his face. Later into the 1800s, the blue paint will be replaced with blackface. And even in the 1930s, when Universal Pictures creates Frankenstein, they've subbed the blackface for green paint. Oh, is it all gone? No, because how does Frankenstein's monster, how does the creature die in the 1932 version? He's lynched.
I didn't even realize. Holy shit!
Yeah.
And she wrote that when she was how old?
when she's 19.
What?
Yeah. And then this is the last paragraph.
Oh my God.
After writing all of that, surviving all that tragedy, when she comes back to writing, here's my final paragraph. She chose as a theme behind the novel she wrote 8 years after Frankenstein. Okay, so published in 1826, when the author was 28 years old and is only 2 years after her husband passes. She writes the book The Last Man. It is set in the 21st century,
Yeah.
when only one man endures, the lone survivor of a terrible plague, having failed for all of his imagination, for all of his knowledge, to save the life of a single person.
Oh my
And that's it.
God.
That is the misunderstood, radical, deeply complex history of Frankenstein and the even more impressive woman who created it.
I am obsessed with her now.
Same.
I knew it had like deep meaning and stuff, obviously, from like taking AP Lit.
Right.
But like, that's insane. Like,
Yeah.
it's not only just her own personal views, her own personal life experience that plays into it. It's also like the socioeconomic problems
Right.
that are occurring in the world that she also plays into it. And that is like so intensely powerful. And the fact that not only was it like well received now, it was well received back then, even
Right.
by men who maybe didn't agree with her because
Right.
they could see themselves in the monster. Like, she wrote a universally understandable intellectual piece.
Right.
And that's at 19.
Having lost one child already and actively nursing a second.
Oh my God.
And what's so fascinating too, when you kind of start to unpack everything, is that if she is using her childhood experience of like being cast away by her father, of being this like collage of all these other people that are connected to her, that people know of, but they don't know her. Like, she's clearly Dr. Frankenstein. But then the story of she's clearly Dr. Frankenstein's creature. She's clearly a monster. But then the arc that the monster goes on that explores concepts that both her father and her mother explored in their own career, but then brings it to what was at the time a contemporary lens and understands like the Haitian slave revolution to it. And so then to create this like eloquent, compelling voice to this monster that she both sees herself as, but also sees as like a vehicle to explore these concepts, and then to take that piece of work written by a young woman who had been like broken by the world several times, and then to take this like almost like activist figure of justice and to water him down into like a slurred speech, dumb, bumbling. Many of us know the 1932 movie, or at least parts of it, character who gets lynched at the end, which in some ways is a perfect personification of what she was trying to argue, and signs that much like her mother would have issues with today's society, so would Mary Shelley.
She's also like taking herself out of it, I feel like, because she's not making it a death that's like, oh, this character died because other people didn't care for it.
Right.
She's like literally taking it. She's like, this represents me, but also I need it to represent this other thing that I care so deeply for. So I'm going to make it more like directly represent that so it hits home.
Right.
Which is insane.
So then you have all this about the story, which is really interesting, like what she actually is writing. But then the way that the novel is written, it's actually written as a series of letters from, I think they said Antarctica,
Oh, really?
From a person who has met this deranged scientist called Dr. Frankenstein. And it is then through these letters that like the story gets told. So you learn the creature's plight, not firsthand, not secondhand, but kind of third going into fourth hand. Right. Like at least with the way parts of the book was written. I truthfully have actually not read the book.
No,
it is in my research. I was like, oh, I misunderstood it. Oh, some of these movies were way off. And then I ended it, hopefully maybe with the way some of you guys are, with like, I think I
think I need to read
this.
it. I think I have it upstairs.
Yeah, maybe not cover to cover, but I mean, like, as we get into September and October, I think it's, honestly, not to get too sappy here, maybe it's the old-fashioned. I think I owe it to Mary Shelley, if I'm going to talk about her legacy for 2 hours, to then spend some time with the pivotal work that defined even today for life.
And I've always like gotten mad about the fact, ever since like I took AP Lit and I found out that it's not Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein's monster. Or, no, because they did Frankenstein as a play. No, a musical at my high school.
They probably did like Young Frankenstein.
Yeah,
and
Young
stuff
Frankenstein,
like
stuff like that. I think it was then that I figured out that it wasn't Frankenstein, it was Frankenstein's monster. And ever since then I've had that like holier than thou, like, well, it's not actually Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein's monster. But now I'm like even more mad that like I'm gonna see costumes at like Spirit Halloween of Frankenstein, of the green. And ooh, it's gonna make me really mad now that they're green.
We are gonna be the most annoying people at every Halloween party.
Oh, we're already annoying. We have a podcast.
We actually did an episode about Frankenstein. I don't know if you had a chance
to hear it. I don't know if you listened to it yet. Oh my god.
Actually, the whole series is actually really great, but this one, because here's a little detail that was mentioned like an hour ago that I want us to kind of like think back to. In the original stage play, when listing the characters' names, it was like Dr. Frankenstein played by like John Smith, that it was blank, and Mary Shelley thought that most appropriate. Both in terms of Mary Shelley's like, I don't own this name. This name's a conglomeration of everyone else. But then also the story that Frankenstein's monster is supposed to represent is like millions of like nameless, abused, and taken advantage of enslaved people. That is why she thought it was appropriate, not because monster has no name funny. Like that's not, it's because I am nameless. None of these names belong to me. But the actual story that this is also relating to,
it's about the oppressed people that are never going to be named.
Who are never going to be named.
Oh my god.
So when I like came over with those 2 frescoes in my hand, and I was like,
I'm so
excited. I was like, this story, in a way that you kind of hope when you start to research, like rattled me a couple times, even when I was doing the research.
Is having the same effect on me as like, oh fuck, what's it called? I don't want to do it any injustice. I need to research it for a second. Portrait of Ross in LA. Okay, so I didn't learn about this until...
Can I ask?
Yes.
Is it a pile of candy in the corner?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, I took a course in art in college. Like we didn't, because I went to an all engineering school, so we didn't have a ton of like history or like
just enough to be like machines killing people's bad.
Machine killing people bad. Yeah. So we didn't have a ton of like liberal arts classes where we could learn like other languages, but we did have to take like classes that weren't just science and stuff. And so I took like environmental impact classes, and then one about like I don't remember what the name of the class was, but it's like studying how science has impacted art.
Sure.
And it was basically just an art class, which is really cool because now I get to go to art museums and be like, hey, Casey, how does this painting make you feel?
The purpose of all art education at some level is superiority.
Oh, I did it to Tyler. I did it to Tyler at the Louvre.
Oh, God.
Oh, it made me feel so good.
To be there with you.
Oh, it made me feel so good.
The money I'd give.
I was like...
Our dear friend,
Tyler. Because he would be standing in front of a painting, and this isn't like verbatim, but this is an example of what happened. He was like, wow, I really love this painting. And I was like, why do you love this painting? And he would be like, it just feels like so safe. And like, I love the colors and like this and that. And I was like, well, you know why you love that painting, right? Because it's built like a triangle with the base at the bottom. And that's how paintings were made, to make you feel safe and secure. And then we would see another painting of like a lion, or like a lion killing a zebra. And I was like, how does this painting make you feel? He's like, unsafe. And I was like, that's because it's a triangle and it's balanced on its tip.
You mansplaining art to Tyler.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Do you know who would absolutely love that? Mary Wollstonecraft.
It made me feel so good.
A woman in France putting a man down. Mary Wollstonecraft would be like, run it back. Run it back.
I've done it to Casey. I've done it to don't go to a museum with me. Yeah. I'm not fun. But I have a good time.
Fun little fusion of, I think, several stories tonight. One of my favorite, and this is never a first date location because I like it too much to burn that way, but it's a second date location if I'm really excited about you, or if we're on a third date, I'm excited about you. That's what it means. No, the MCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art downtown.
That's what I meant. Yeah, sorry.
We go up to the top. Where there's the view and you get a drink, bar, and you just like there for a second. And the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver is downtown, and it overlooks the cityscape. And there's always like some unknown indie band playing live music in the corner.
So
and there's 8 people, and everyone's wearing something insanely different. It's like the airport, but classy. And then you, after like had a chance to drink and stuff like that, and like have done a little of that like warm up talk of like, so how's your day been and stuff like that. You then walk through the 3 layers of the MCA. And like talk about the art, and then you empty out onto the city street of Denver, and then one of you goes, hey, do you want to grab a drink?
That's beautiful.
Oh, I know. Go on a date with me. It's a good time.
I also do, part of this class was going to the MCA.
Nice.
I like did it, I don't know if it was extra credit or if it was like an assignment or something, but they had an exhibit there, and I don't remember the name of the artist. I'll have to look it up, but it was a she. She created, it was mainly environmental impact type art.
Sure.
And one of it was like springs, that you play with when you're like a kid, and it's all warped into this like giant bubble. And I have pictures of it that I can show you guys, but it like, even in the picture, it doesn't look real. And it's just mind-boggling
to see.
Yeah, but
I love that a story about literature ends with you and I just like geeking out about art for a little
love
bit.
art so much, and it makes me, because especially going to an engineering school.
No, go ahead, keep talking. So I'm just looking at your huge wall of art behind us. The thing that receives more compliments than I do.
This like little snippet, I don't even think shows my favorite pieces. I think my favorite pieces are probably upstairs.
Do we need to have some of this for the next thing that we're about to record?
We can probably do some of it, but I want to talk about this piece since I mentioned it. So the story about Mary Shelley and like how impactful it is and how many different layers there are is like hitting me in the same way. I think this might have been one of the first pieces that our teacher showed us where I was like, oh my God. And it's not like I'm going to start crying because it's not that it's going to make me cry. It's going to like sit like heavy on your like chest, It's like a very different feeling, but this artist is Felix Gonzalez Torres, and he created a piece of art called, oh my God, I think it's just called, quote, Untitled. Like that's the name of it, because it's like what Mary Shelley was doing of like this person will never be named.
Nameless.
Yes, and then parentheses, portrait of Ross in LA, and I don't remember the full story of who he was, but he was gay.
If I remember correctly, Ross is the boyfriend of the person that created the exhibition. Yes. Yeah.
I'm not sure if they were out and together or not, but he created this piece of art, and this was during the AIDS epidemic, and how it was supposed to kind of represent how AIDS eats away at you. And so what he did, and modern art, drives me fucking nuts when people don't understand that there's depth to it, because people will see like a canvas on a wall with one line through it and they're like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It doesn't represent any talent. It doesn't represent this. And it drives me nuts because it's never, especially in modern art or contemporary art, it's never about the talent of the artist. It's about the meaning behind the art. And so this piece of art is not even paint on a canvas, like Grant kind of alluded to. It is literally a pile of candy in the corner.
Right.
And he encouraged people, every time this installation is installed, it's encouraged for everyone who walks by to enjoy this piece of art, take a piece of candy and eat it. Right. And so slowly this pile of candy dissolves into nothing.
And there's this thing too where like the candy is wrapped and set. It's not like 100 Tootsie Rolls. It's like this massive pile of bright
colorful
art.
Candy.
And so it also represents how like HIV/AIDS robbed us of these like beautiful, colorful, artistic people who's withered away and then one day there was nothing left.
And
they just disappeared.
It's called A Portrait of Ross because that was his lover or whoever, and he weighed 175 pounds at the beginning, and the amount of candy set to be in the corner at the beginning is 175 pounds.
Yeah.
And that just is, it's like the same kind of, where it's just like, there's so many, every single detail you kind of focus in on has its own meaning, and whether or not that's a meaning that the artist initially kind of intended, it's still a meaning.
Right.
And that's what's so beautiful. That's what I think is so beautiful about contemporary art, because it is vague in that way, that every person that views it can take their own life experience and apply their own meaning to it, and then take away their own perception of it, instead of like you see The Last Supper or something like those beautiful pieces like Mona Lisa, all of they're stunning.
But where there's a specific takeaway you're supposed to be coming from.
And they're beautiful. They're artistically done. The technique is incredible, but it isn't like I'm seeing this piece and I am applying my own life experience to it and having my own deep emotional reaction, you know? And like I can cry, I can look at the Mona Lisa and have an emotional reaction. It's not the same.
I think the thing that you are talking a lot about, but I keep waiting for you to like to say it, which is that like oftentimes
I'm bad at saying things.
Art, especially, no, you're not, you're fantastic. Oftentimes the most powerful art isn't even really for the audience, but it is for the creator to process what has happened to them.
Yeah.
So Portrait of Ross, Frankenstein.
Oh my God.
All of these are just examples of artists being like, here is the horrible thing that has happened to me, but it's created such human expression out of me that it's created something beautiful. And I don't even think it's about like grieving or moving on. I think it's just the human
representation of it.
Yeah, the human representation and the human inclination of, with these deep, powerful emotions, I need to express them in some way. This is a shout out to all girlies with poetry in their notes app. We're going to get over this breakup, girly. You and me both.
Even if Grant will never let me see the poetry.
Correct, because I will never get over anything ever.
Yeah, but to bring it all back, my therapist today even said sometimes it's not even about like saying something because it's upsetting you and hoping to like work something out. Sometimes it's just about saying something to someone who you know will understand the problem that you're perceiving.
And that is exactly why over the last 7-8 months, I have really valued having a chance to sit next to you.
Oh.
This isn't a goodbye or anything. This is just me being like, this is why
I don't take compliments well,
know,
Grant.
so I have to say bye now. Also, I have to use the restroom if that helps lighten the mood.
Yeah,
We
anyway.
appreciate you sitting through the episode. Hopefully you learned something new.
And Casey sitting at the top of the stairs.
Exactly. Like a kid for Christmas. Until then, y'all.
We're on social media at Well I Laughed, on Patreon at Well I Laughed Podcast. And then if you want to email us, we're at welilaughedpod@gmail.com.
And you will get a response from me unless it's something technical, in which case I will screenshot it from Maia and be like, you have a message for you.
Yeah.
So until then, y'all.
Yeah. Message us. We love you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.